Today is August 12th, 2020. I was awoken this morning at around 5:37. It's like I was in a deep sleep, and then it's like I was awoken as one who was dead. Because my eyes just popped open and suddenly I was wide awake. And the Lord began ministering to me in this message that I need to convey. Sure, in accordance with 1 John 4:1, please test the spirit. But another caution I'll tell you is you may want to listen to this message with steel-toe boots on, because I'm going to step on a lot of toes. In many countries, we're now entering, or we have entered, an election cycle. For example, here in the United States, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, stuff like that. Whichever country you are in, the Lord is letting you know to come up higher, come up to where He is, get His perspective for things. For example, yesterday in the United States, it was announced that Kamala Harris is the Democrats' choice to serve along with Joe Biden as his potential vice president. And many things start hitting the airwaves. And basically you have the prophets of one party and the prophets of another party. And people are on the ground, but they don't have God's perspective. In Exodus 17, the Israelites were battling against the Amalekites. Joshua was in the valley leading the battle. But some of the elder statesmen, such as Moses, the leader of the Israelites, Aaron, the high priest, Hur, they were on a hill overwatching what was going on. And that is a position the Lord wants His children, professing Christians, to take. Yes, you will have to go down into the valley, meaning you will have to cast your vote. But before you cast your vote, before you start promoting one party or another, come up higher. Get the Lord's counsel. Because it is amazing, yet it symbolizes how Jesus said that He would return to separate the sheep from the goats. Judgment begins in the house of God. So it's amazing how we have many people professing to serve the same God when it comes to matters important to the Lord, like who should be the president, prime minister, premier, or whatsoever the case may be, that professing Christians are unified in whom they choose to vote for. And people go back and forth defending one person, one party over another. God is not the author of confusion. So before you vote, it is important. Shut everything off. Spend some time with the Lord and get His guidance regarding who to vote for. A part of the reason why I'm dressed in purple here in the United States, Republicans, their color, red. Democrat, blue. I'm wearing purple because despite what I'm going to say today, I stand in the middle. I stand with the Lord. I referenced Moses regarding Exodus 17. When the Israelites got into idolatry, worshiping a golden idol, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai after spending time with the Lord, he went into the camp and asked who was on the Lord's side. Ultimately, ensure, especially as a professing Christian, that you are on the Lord's side. Because a part of this, if you do not get God's counsel regarding how to proceed, what you're going to hear from Him is that you have forsaken me for your idols. And after hearing that comes judgment. You do not want to forsake the Lord for your idols. Search the scriptures. See what happened whenever the Lord said anything to the effect, you have forsaken me for your gods. You have forsaken me for your idols. It doesn't go well. So before you start getting caught up in the warfare, ensure you have the Lord's counsel, that you're actually speaking on his behalf. When I say speak, not necessarily like I'm speaking now, but when you go to cast your vote, you're voting for who the Lord wants in power. Because ultimately, this is about power. Now I'm going to transition a little bit to start speaking about some other things. And yes, it relates to the election. There's a pastor, Dana Coverstone, and he had some dreams. One of which he mentioned something about seeing Russian and Chinese troops, boots on ground in the United States. Personally, I do not believe it represents Russian and Chinese troops like invading the country. Because we're serving as an embassy, like the United States have embassies over the world or throughout the world. At those embassies, you will have Marines defending the embassies. So we have troops in many different places. But a part of that represents a heavy presence from the Chinese and the Russians, because they have a vested interest in this country regarding who is going to be in power. Now, many people have spoken about President Trump, and there have been allegations about Russian collusion. But a part of the hypocrisy is that many people speak about President Trump regarding potential Russian collusion. But on March 26, 2012, Barack Obama, then President Barack Obama, at a public meeting with Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, there was an open mic incident, but many people seemingly forget about that was shown publicly, and is speaking about things the president could have done behind closed doors. So again, March 26, 2012, do not forget about the open mic incident between then President Barack Obama and then President of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev. With that being said, the Russians and the Chinese, they have a vested interest in this country, regarding who wins. And they're going to try their best to get their person in power. Regarding Joe Biden, the same way people will overlook the things President Obama did, people are overlooking the obvious flaws with Joe Biden, his cognitive decline. CNN, they'll tell you, and they have told you, the president or Joe Biden, he's presidential, look at him, he's riding a bicycle. That doesn't mean he doesn't have cognitive decline. That doesn't mean they're not cognitive issues. It is clear when he speaks. But they'll show you him riding a bicycle as if that makes him presidential. Well, if riding a bicycle makes you presidential, here is a potential candidate for president. We have to open our eyes, and that's why we need God's perspective to see things the way he sees it. Now, with President Trump, he is not perfect, and he needs people around him for as long as he's president that are going to tell him the truth. Not yes men. Now, it is one thing to speak to the president one way privately and another publicly. That is understandable, but he needs people around him who are actually going to give him godly counsel. The Lord had Joseph serve under Pharaoh. Pharaoh had a dream or two dreams that he needed interpretation. The Lord used Joseph to give him the interpretation. A part of showing that Joseph was trustworthy, a part of showing that Joseph would tell the Pharaoh what the Lord said, whether good or bad, was that he told him about the two dreams. One being for 7 years of feast, another 7 years of famine. Daniel was a prophet who advised many kings. He told the kings the truth. For example, Daniel 4, Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that the dream he had had about the watchers were symbolic or spoke about his pride. If he didn't keep his pride in check, he was going to fall. Regardless of who the president is, prime minister, whatever your country's leader's title is, those are the kind of people they need. Those who are going to give them godly counsel. But a part of getting godly counsel is being a godly person. Because some people do not want to hear the truth. They only want to hear what toes a specific party's lines. So President Trump, not perfect, and he needs people around him to tell him the truth, God's truth, give him godly counsel. With the warfare, Kamala Harris. Joe Biden, he's a shell of who he used to be. He is a shell of who he used to be. And for as much as he's the face of the party right now, the Democratic Party, a lot of this is about Kamala Harris. I'm going to say something. It may sound as if it's a ad hominem attack, but it is not. In Genesis 49, when Jacob, Israel, was speaking over his children, he called Benjamin a ravenous wolf. I think it was Naphtali he called a doe. Judah, a lion's whelp. With Kamala, she's literally a chameleon. It's like Kamala, the chameleon Harris. Many people are touting, well, she's a woman. She's a woman of color. She's a woman of color who has these different things with her heritage. And yes, those are all great. But does that make her a fitting vice president? What it makes her capable of doing is blending in. That is where the chameleon moniker comes in. Blending in. Who will tell you what you want to hear to advance an objective. We need to start seeing things from the Lord's perspective. Representative John Lewis recently passed away. And at his funeral, his memorial service, I think it's at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, some blasphemy. Reverend Raphael Warnock, the Lord Jesus Christ rebuke you. I saw a message a few days ago, and someone showed a clip with this pastor speaking. And it's like, wow. But there was something else that I caught. I was like, is that the pastor or is that Barack Obama? And before recording this message, I played his full speech, which was about 9 minutes long. I need to include a link to that speech in the description box of this video. I'm listening to the eulogy. And I understand, when you eulogize a person, you may not put all their dirt out there. In fact, I have a eulogy to give to a person who hasn't passed away yet, but the Lord has given me the words. I can tell you it won't be pretty. But it's nothing against the person, and I won't be speaking against the person, but the Lord has some hard truths to convey. The Lord has some hard truths to convey. So understand about eulogy. David, he spent years on a run from King Saul. And I wonder if some of David's men were like, when David was eulogizing King Saul, if they're like, is David speaking about Saul? The guy he was running from like 5 minutes ago? Because David spoke so highly of Saul in 2 Samuel 1. That's like, wow. So I understand that. But there are certain places you don't go. You do not start juxtaposing a man whose blood does no good, whose blood saves no one's lives, whose blood doesn't redeem us from sins. You do not juxtapose a person in Isaiah 53, which is speaking about the Lord Jesus Christ and Him only. John Lewis was bruised, but he was not bruised for our iniquities. John Lewis is not a redeemer. And this kind of idolatry the Lord is speaking about. You have forsaken me for your idols. You have forsaken me for your idols. In Isaiah 53, and I'll read from verses 1 through 10, this is about Jesus and Him only, not about John Lewis or anyone else. Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief, and we hid as it were our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did not esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. And this is where the pastor got into serious error. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. And by the way, it is interesting, when you listen to this video, and I kind of clue you in, what I discerned, thanks to the Lord, is that the pastor was speaking and his voice sounded one way. But then there's a portion when he starts speaking about from Isaiah 53:5, where his voice changed, and it's kind of like, hold up. Am I listening to Reverend Warnock or Barack Obama? So it's like that same Antichrist spirit rose up and was speaking. It's kind of like Peter rebuking Jesus, and the Lord said, Satan, get thee behind me, thou art an offense to me. And a part of that, Peter, the way he was speaking, his concerns were of men and not of God. His concerns were of men and not of God. And that was what Reverend Raphael Warnock did in his eulogy. In his eulogy about John Lewis. His concerns became of men. And there's some people in the church that, in a sense, that pastor should have turned the mic and start rebuking them. They should not have been so comfortable in his church. But I continue. Let me read verse 5 again, all the way through 10. But he, Jesus, was wounded for our transgressions. He, Jesus, was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, Jesus. And with his, Jesus, stripes we are healed. All we, like sheep, have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him, Jesus, the iniquity of us all. He, Jesus, was oppressed, and he, Jesus, was afflicted. Yet he, Jesus, opened not his, Jesus, mouth. He, Jesus, is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb. So he, Jesus, opened not his mouth. Jesus. He, Jesus, was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he, Jesus, was cut off out of the land of the living. for the transgression of my people was he, Jesus, stricken. And he, Jesus, made his, Jesus, grave with the wicked and with the rich in his, Jesus, death. Because he, Jesus, had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Jesus' mouth. And I'm not disparaging the dead, but do you think John Lewis went to the grave without any deceit in his mouth? Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him, Jesus. He hath put him, Jesus, to grief. When thou shalt make his, Jesus, soul an offering for sin. Jesus, his soul and his soul only was made an offering for sin. His blood and his blood only cleanses from all sin and unrighteousness. In many ways, people have forsaken the Lord for their idols. He shall proceed long his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. Jesus is the one who's Lord of Lords, King of Kings. Jesus is the one who's seated at the right hand of the Father, making intercession for us. John Lewis, yes, he did things, honorable things, notable things. But we don't put anyone on the level of Jesus. We don't put Kamala Harris on the level of Jesus. We don't put Mike Pence on the level of Jesus. We don't put Joe Biden on the level of Jesus. We don't put President Trump on the level of Jesus. And some of you need to take Barack Obama down from the level of Jesus. Because you have forsaken the Lord already for your idols. It is time to come up higher. Get on that hill. Get with the Lord, just like how Moses was on Mount Sinai, spending time with the Lord, getting his perspective. So when you go into the valley, you can stand among people and say who is on the Lord's side. Now, who's a Republican, who's a Democrat, but who is on the Lord's side? That devil is a liar. The spiritual warfare is on. By the way, what happened yesterday? Some of you may have been going through spiritual warfare, and you may have noticed that things kind of lifted. And it's like, what happened? It's like the forces who were against you, where are they? They were busy. Because yesterday, people were speaking about Kamala Harris. Some were speaking about President Trump. And there was a war on earth. There's a war in the heavenlies. Spirits coming against each other. It's like in the Bible where you saw that people were fighting, or there was about to be a battle. But the next thing you know, there was a battle in their own hometown and they had to go and resolve it instead. There was a fight in the enemy's camp. So some of the forces that were coming against you, they had to pull back to go fight in the heavenlies. So if you notice a shift in your spiritual warfare where suddenly like it lifted, the enemy was busy. Things going on in the earth is a reflection of what's going on in the heavens. The fight is on. All these things are going on, protests, etc. They're distractions. They're devices of the enemy to try to get you to vote one way instead of the other. You see people, for example, they're tearing down idols, tearing down statues. But what are they doing? They're putting up other statues in its place, other statues. So it's trading idol for idol. So even in the enemy's camp, there's a war regarding who's going to be the God of the day. In the Bible, we see gods, for example, lowercase G-O-D-S, Baal, Beelzebub, Molech, Chemosh. So there's a war. Which God? And it's like they want you to fight for any God except for the true living God. Did a video recently that the Lord had me do about BLM. You may think you're fighting for BLM, but you're fighting for Leviathan. As the Lord said to Job, Leviathan is the king of the children of pride. The king of the children of pride. Especially if you're a prophet, ensure that during this season, you are a prophet of the Lord and not a prophet of the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, or any other party based in your country. That you are a prophet of the Lord. When Jehoram, King Ahab's son, Ahab, who used to be married to Jezebel, when he was going to battle with Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and the king of the Edomites, they wanted a prophet of the Lord to inquire of. They called for Elisha. Elisha said that if it wasn't for Jehoshaphat, he wouldn't even look at Jehoram. And he even told Jehoram to go inquire of his father's prophets, his mother's prophets. But they needed a prophet of the Lord. And Elisha actually gave him word of the Lord, based on Jehoshaphat, not Jehoram. Need to be prophets of the Lord and not prophets of a party. When Ahab was in power, when he was alive, and he had partnered with Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, his prophets had told him one thing, which was for his demise. But Jehoshaphat wanted to inquire for a prophet of the Lord, so they called for Micaiah. Be the prophet of the Lord, who's going to say what thus saith the Lord, and not what people want to hear, but what the Lord is saying, lest they perish. King Ahab, he had a choice. Listen to his false prophets, or what Micaiah was saying. He chose to listen to his false prophets, went to Ramoth Gilead, and he died a slow but painful death, knowing he had made a mistake. But he had been warned, and he still disobeyed the warning. Be the person who will stand out. Be like a Joseph who will tell the Pharaoh the truth. Like a Daniel who will be an advisor to many kings, many of whom didn't know God, didn't worship him, would want to kill people for not worshiping them. But Daniel still stood firm in his faith. He represented the Lord wheresoever he was. That is what the Lord requires of his prophets. Always. But especially during this season. Not to be a partisan prophet, but a prophet of the Lord. And the thing with Kamala Harris. One of the things, when based on the announcement yesterday, and it wasn't a surprise that it was going to be a woman, but based on the announcement yesterday, it's almost like digging up Jezebel from the grave. Because a part of this, when you know about the story of Ahab and Jezebel, Ahab was a king. He had the power. He had the signet ring. But Jezebel would use Ahab's signet ring to include declaring an unholy fast to accomplish her agenda for her gods. So yes, Ahab was a king, but Jezebel was running things. Sounds familiar under the circumstances? On this day, choose which God you will serve. And then seek that God regarding what to do. Not only who to vote for, but which organizations to support. Do not make the mistake of lending your voice, lending your tightly position from the Lord to give voice to the enemy. Again, this thing about the sheep and the goats in the house of God. How can there be so much division regarding, for example, political things? And there's division regarding doctrinal things between people who are serving the same God, the same Spirit, allegedly. And the Holy Spirit is not a spirit of confusion. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. But we all have different conclusions. You would say we're serving the same God. I submit to you. They're sheep, and they're goats. They may look alike. They may sound alike. But there's some subtle differences to let you know who is standing on the Lord's side. Be careful about which shepherd you're following, because that shepherd is going to lead you to where he or she is going. Those prophets who were following Jezebel, they were going the same place she was going. So be careful about who you're following, who you're listening, which story you're propagating. Be careful that you're not trying to curse what God has blessed. You're not trying to bless what God has cursed. It is time to come higher. Spend time with the Lord. Get His perspective. Yes, you will have to go into the valley to fight the battle. Some battle regarding who you're going to vote for. All the battle is regarding who you're going to pray for, what you're going to pray. So there are physical aspects, such as voting, spiritual aspects, such as praying. But before all, come up higher. Spend time with the Lord. Get His perspective. That's also part of how you test the Spirit behind this message. And my phone rang earlier. It doesn't oftentimes do that. And I actually prayed and asked the Lord, but still the phone rang. Those are kind of things, distractions. Stay focused. Stay focused. And keep your eyes on the prize. Keep your eyes on the Lord. And may His will and His good and perfect will be done in Jesus' name. But sadly, when His will is done, many people will cry out and saying this was unjust. They will love what God hates. They will love what God hates. I beseech you, come up higher. Spend time with the Lord. Get His perspective. Because if you don't, you're going to hear you have forsaken me for your idols.